I'll bite. It's more challenge.
It's a syndrome where sufferers believe they have disease-causing fibers under their skin. They collect them only to later be told by dermatologists that all they found is lint, dead skin, or their own picked scabs. There's a lot of overlap there. There's also patients who insist the fibers are insect-like in nature.
It's called a mirror bot.
It's for amputees with searing pain in their phantom limbs. Basically, you take a patient, you put them in front of a mirror, and you tell them to conduct a symphony, to wave, or just to relax. When their brain sees what's not there, the pain goes away. You could argue that his itch was the same thing as phantom limb pain. I mean from a brain nervous system feedback loop. The first victim, Tommy Wilcox, died from malnutrition and his muscles were severely atrophied, which means his physical activity must have been extremely limited. It's possible he spent the duration of his captivity restrained. We're classifying him as something called a fundamentalist vigilante, but less than you might think. Ariel Castro held 3 women hostage in the middle of a residential area for years, but he has to work to eat and to subsidize that space, so he most likely has a job. All the way back to the Battle of St. Scholastica Day.
Okay, I'll take the bait. What is the whatever it is that you just said?
The Battle of St. Scholastica Day? I'm glad you asked. Oxford University, 1335, citizens attacked students and professors with bows and arrows. Fighting went on for 2 days and nearly 100 people were killed. Speaking of that, you might want to consider revamping your circadian clock to a more traditional chronotype. Seriously, studies have found that night owls show reduced integrity of white matter in their brain compared to early risers. Sorry, the transcripts from the police interview with the first victim's mother, Charlotte Wilcox, I read them.
And?
Mrs. Wilcox, do you remember anything unusual about the night Tommy disappeared? No, nothing. Are you absolutely sure? There's nothing, because anything might help. I don't know, toilet paper maybe? Sorry, ma'am, I went to the store to buy toilet paper, and when I got back, I couldn't find it. But what could that have to do with anything? Oh God, I can't believe this is happening. I'm just reading here that the ME thinks the victims were alive for 48 hours while he disarticulates. Exactly, he wouldn't go to these extremes if he were merely discarding the limbs. He obviously enjoys the ritual. It's some kind of torture. ME says he's gotten better at ligating each victim, which means he may have had practice. It looks like Roman numeral 5, which means there are 2 more bodies out there. Because he's probably in the 6th circle. This unsub's recreating the circles of hell. 4th victim was crushed, like the punishment in the next circle reserved for greed. The 5th circle's wrath, where sinners were drowned in swampy water, which is exactly what happened in the next victim. Highly unusual. 80% of plane crashes happen within 3 minutes of takeoff or 8 minutes of landing. ManPad, a shoulder-launched surface-to-air missile were used. We're looking at a target acquisition range of 6 miles. Factor into that the plane's forward momentum as it's coming down, and we're left with this area right here. It's possible the plane was brought down to 20,000 feet to get it into ManPad target range. This is important because an airplane wants to be nose up. It creates positive G's, that sensation you get when you're forced into the back of your seat. Nose of a plane begins pitching downward, you get negative G's, which puts enormous pressure on the structural integrity of the aircraft. With enough negative G's, the wings will start to rip off the plane, which then compromises the fuselage. I don't think this is torture for the unsub. I think it's a delusion. It's important that we do not label this unsub as crazy or insane to the media or press. He's desperate to confirm his own self-diagnosis, and he'll be violent towards those who don't. Labels are important here. The original name for this was entomophobia, which is, yes, the fear/disgust of being bitten, being stung, or the fear of future infestation. But if you have delusional parasitosis, you believe you're already infested. Studies have linked the excessive taking of selfies to narcissism, addiction, even mental illness. Maybe the unsub was attracted to her. Stabbing is typically a substitution for sex. Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, a devilish version of him anyway. Form of ostension. When someone does the acts described in a story in order to bring them to life. We've seen it before with the poisoning of Halloween candy, and most recently with the Slender Man case in Wisconsin earlier this year. William Faulkner described Mark Twain as the father of American literature. This unsub sees himself similarly. He wants to become the forefather of modern war. The first time a convict targeted an attorney. Just last year in Texas, Eric Williams killed 2 prosecutors. Believe it or not, hypothermia is a rather pleasant way to die. The cold just kind of puts you to sleep. Usually it's postmortem gas production that brings a body to the surface, but if you freeze it, it'll rise to the top like ice cubes in a drink. Much like Jerry Sandusky, who hid behind his nonprofit foundation for underprivileged and at-risk youth in order to abuse young boys over several decades. They've been carrying the burden of their victimization around with them for years, and it's affected their ability to find, maintain employment, as well as serious relationships. This is a deeply personal mission, and it's been fueled by years of shame, hatred, and anger, which has finally exploded to the surface. This is MELD score, model for end-stage liver disease. It's a point system the United Network for Organ Sharing uses to determine those most in need. The liver is the greatest regenerative capacity of any organ in the human body, and a transplanted portion from a living donor will go to full size in a couple of weeks. Raymond Fernandez used to place personal ads in the newspaper. He would seduce and rob the women who answered them. This feels like page 118. Anarchist Cookbook? TNT for Dummies? The book also teaches you how to make nitroglycerin. The coffee shop could represent a steep learning curve. I recognize the makeup. 92% nitroglycerin, 8% nitrocellulose. Water, honey, ginger, and tea. Honey, ginger tea, and salt water are often used to treat sore throats. The Citadel Corrections Company has more than quadrupled their holdings since they were founded 20 years ago. They now have 19 facilities all across the country, 59,603 prisoners in their charge. The number 7 is widely regarded as being lucky, and it plays a ubiquitous role in most of the world's major religions, not to mention astrology, astronomy, literature, music. Could be. I mean, what if this is really all about erotic asphyxiation? Cutting off his victim's air supply might be how he satisfies his own urges. Even though he's only a witness, that moment created a single event imprint on his love map and probably started his interest in breath play. Ironically, it may have been easier to kidnap her in a crowd. It's noisy, hard to see, people are distracted. If she was injected with a sedative, the kidnappers might just look like friends or family helping someone who's feeling ill. He obviously has a clear ideal. Statistically, annihilators are fathers who've lost or killed their own families and are trying to replace their role in the unit. Precision to the disarray. In an actual fight, damage tends to follow the path of the struggle, much like debris in a storm. This feels more like a calm, methodical breaking of specific items. 3 a.m., then 15.4 gallons at 9:22 p.m. What kind of car does he drive?
Audi A6 2012.
See, with a highway to city ratio of 4:1, average to 29 miles per gallon, which is standard for that make, model, and year, he traveled roughly 450 miles, which, assuming one way and back, puts his destination 225 miles per hour. They were 3 to 4 years old at the time. Firm memories don't imprint on the developing brain until about age 5. Popular thinking is that recovered memories are actually just a form of self-hypnosis. That's why the patients are so convinced the delusion is real. The plastic tested positive for sevoflurane and scopolamine. The first is used to put you into a waking dream. Dentists often use it during oral surgery. The second, in high doses, makes you completely suggestible. Encryption's a highly specialized skill set, but it's fundamentally a mathematical process. I think I know where he learned how to do that. When you're good at math, you're good enough to get into Harvard, you take a math class called Math 15. When you're better than that, you take Math 25. But when you're the best, the absolute best, you take Math 55. Honors advanced calculus and linear algebra. Graduates are immediately employed by the US government because they're too dangerous to work anywhere else. More specifically, they're employed at the NSA. She's clenching her jaw, drinking water, and can't seem to sit still. I think she's on something, and I'm assuming it's MDMA.
How many boats are there on Lake Mead?
1,908. There was one documented case about a woman who couldn't stop scratching, even when she was asleep. She woke up one morning realizing she'd scratched through her own scalp, her skull, and directly into her brain tissue. Technically, it's cryonics and not cryogenics. Cryogenics is a scientifically proven process involving the successful freezing and thawing of materials without damage. Cryonics involves taking an already dead body and putting it in liquid nitrogen. It has no scientific merit whatsoever. Although the observable universe is continually expanding, there's really no way of knowing if the whole thing is going to ultimately collapse into one gargantuan black hole.
Don't forget to subscribe, follow, like and comments for updates.